The oxygen deficit is much lower than maximal exercise due to the fact that the body does not need as much oxygen as the intensity is lower. However, it will still go past steady state. Your oxygen level will be lower as well because recovery is slower because you are you're having to replenish more oxygen. Your metabolic needs are also very important for recovery as they give the energy needed for respiratory muscles and to keep heart rate and breathing rate elevated to recover. After a very hard session, athletes may feel delayed onset of muscle soreness, otherwise known as DOMS. This is caused by myofibril tears from the high-intensity exercise. These tears then lead to an inflammatory response, swelling, and altered muscle firing patterns and pain 24 to 48 hours after exercise. Your muscle strength and motion can then become impaired, and light movement and passive stretching can often help this. Other ways people can aid recovery are sports massages, cryotherapy, which are ice baths, meditation, and an active cool down. Next we are going to talk about submaximal intensity and long duration. An example of submaximal exercise is a long-distance runner, e.g. 5k, or a triathlete. This is because these activities require a long duration but a submaximal intensity. Submaximal activities will have a high VO2 max at around 70 milliliters. For these activities, you will be using your ATP, PC, lactic acid, and your aerobic system, and the energy sources will be ATP for ATP and PC, glycogen for the lactic acid system, and fat stores and very rarely proteins for the aerobic system. From these systems we will get a few waste products: heat, lactic acid, carbon dioxide and water. Your glycogen, which carbohydrate stores, are found in the blood glucose, liver glycogen and muscle glycogen, as they need to use this during exercise. The storage for fat is in a few places, including your muscle triglycerides and adipose tissue. Because your muscle glycogen is continually being used, your glycogen stores will deplete much quicker, and that is when you will start getting into your fat and protein stores. As you can see from the graph, the heavier the exercise, the quicker your glycogen stores will get depleted. And also, during light exercise, you will see no real change in your glycogen content, as it will stay at about 100%. When the athlete's RER goes below 1, then there is a mix of carbohydrates and fats being used for fuel store. This is around 0.85. However, when your RER is 0.7, then this indicates that fat is the dominant fuel source. When your fat stores have been used up, then this goes to your protein stores, which would be bad for the athlete as this protein comes from your muscle, and so athletes try everything to try and avoid going into these stores. The main waste products from the aerobic system are water and carbon dioxide, which is good because these waste products don't fatigue the athlete because they are easily removed. Excess water can be removed by sweating, which is the body's way of keeping us cool, and also through urination. Carbon dioxide is removed from the muscles to the blood, and then it gets taken to the alveoli by diffusion and then removed from the lungs when we exhale. Overall, when the athlete passes the lactic acid stage and goes into the aerobic stage, then they don't fatigue as much due to the waste products being as fatiguing, and they also reach steady state. To try and reduce the little fatigue there is, athletes use glycogen loading, or otherwise known as carbo loading. This is when athletes take in lots of carbohydrates the days before their big race, so that muscle glycogen is readily available, and and this is important for the maintenance of the high intensity exercise and for them to be able to keep going as long as they have to. For submaximal exercise, the recovery can take days due to it being long duration and having to replenish and resynthesize all of the stores that have been depleted throughout the activity. For long distance activities, the oxygen deficit is smaller and the athlete reaches steady state due to it being mostly aerobic respiration, so less lactic acid. And you can see here, which is the back bit on the left graph. This also means the EPOC is less, and there is a quicker recovery because less VO2 is consumed. You can see this oxygen deficit from the graph on the left and then the oxygen EPOC from the graph on the right. For this recovery, the metabolic needs will be higher so that we can keep our heart rate and breathing rate up for long enough so that we can allow our body to recover fully. We will be using both alactic and lactacid recovery. However, because recovery is much slower, we'll be mainly using the lactacid slow recovery, which is mainly just to remove carbon dioxide and lactic acid and to replenish our muscle glycogen stores. Next, we're going to talk about intermittent activities. For this section, I'm going to be talking about a game of rugby. Depending on the game, there is a varied intensity, but normally a high duration. This is because each game, and depending on what position you play, makes the intensity varied. For a rugby game, all of the systems are used throughout the game. The ATP and PC system will be used during a line-out in the game, as they will need power to be able to make the jump, and the supporters around also have to keep that player up until the ball is thrown and retrieved. And a line-out is shown on the screen. Your lactic acid system will be used when sprinting towards a line of defenders and continuing to push forwards against the resistance posed by the opposition. Finally, the aerobic system is used as players have to run up and down the pitch to wherever the ball is to be able to attack and defend effectively with the whole team. The energy sources used are creatine phosphate, pyruvic acid, glucose and glycogen stores. The waste products here are heat, lactic acid, water and carbon dioxide. Calcium ions are released from the sarcoplasmic reticulum so that a nerve impulse can be sent to the end of the motor neuron, then across the synapse as ACH, so that the myosin arm and actin will bind together. Neuromuscular fatigue will lead to a decrease in depolarization, potassium, which lead to a decrease in ACH and cholinesterase, and then a decrease in calcium, which will mean that sliding filament theory won't happen. This is because calcium ions are needed for muscle contraction. Acetylcholine, ACH, is required to transfer the nerve impulse across the synaptic gap. So if not enough ACH arrives at the receptor site, the muscle contraction cannot take place and fatigue occurs. Cholinesterase is an enzyme which breaks down ACH and prepares it so that it can be used again. If there is excess ACH or a lack of cholinesterase, then there is fatigue because there is an inability to generate a new action potential. To help reduce this fatigue, athletes use a pre-cooling strategy. This is when you pre-cool the body by ingesting a slushy or other cold drinks, or external cooling can reduce temperature during exercise. This can then improve performance because it stops the body from overheating. And at the end of the game of rugby, there is more general tiredness than any other fatigue. Recovery for this activity depends on how long each game is and also what position you play. It can take up to a couple of hours to a couple of days depending on what intensity the athlete is working at. A game of rugby consists of 2 halves of 40 minutes, with injury time added on at the end of each half. Between each half, both teams get a 10-minute break, which they can use as a short recovery and to take on any fluids and get ready for the second half of the game. This activity requires lactic acid slow recovery, and most players will not fully recover during the 10 minutes in between the first and second half of the game, so this is why recovery will take longer after.